Okay. So, coming off a lesson where we talked about how to solve a percent using proportions. Okay, yes, there are some of you guys that may have not liked that method. All right, so today I'm going to teach you a different way to solve the same type of problems. Okay, using a different skill. All right, and that skill is using a percent, what's called a percent equation. All right, now there are some pros and cons about it. All right, there's some ways that it will be better than the other one, and then there's some little things that will happen that it's not quite as easy as the other one. But I'm going to show you guys how we're going to use a percent equation to solve the problem. Okay, I do want to say up front. All right, if you're one of the people that after this lesson you're like, oh no, I feel more comfortable with the percent proportion, I am okay with that. Okay, there's a reason why I'm teaching you two different ways. Okay, however, for tonight's homework, you're not going to use a percent proportion. I need you. The whole point of today's lesson is for you to get good at this, to try this. Okay, if you get to the test, you never know when it will say, please use the percent equation to solve this problem, because we'll have tests like that, or quizzes. Okay, so you need to be good at both. However, if you get to the test and it doesn't tell you which thing to use, then I'm okay with you using whichever one you're comfortable with. Okay, but you do need to practice both. You need to be able to understand how to use both. All right, so here we go. So the percent equation, that's our one word, percent equation. Everyone? All right, now listen. There's a little asterisk here. All right, that means that for some reason, I have no idea why, but the book didn't. It's in the book, obviously, right? It's our homework, but they didn't put this as a vocab word in the book. I don't know why. Okay, but here's what we're going to do. I am going to have you record something in just a bit, but here's what I want you to realize. The percent equation is an equation that describes the relationship between the part, whole, and percent. All right, remember there's our three parts of a percent problem we talked about already. All right, part, whole, and a percent. Now you don't have to write that down, but here's what I do want you to write down. Go to the bottom of your page. Okay, if you want to write down the word percent equation, you can, where you remember what it is, but here's what I want you to write down. That is the percent equation. The part is equal to the percent times the whole. Part is equal to percent times the whole. Now right next to that, here's what you can write. This is a way that you can think of it as well. Part, we'll put P, be careful, it's not percentage, P is for part, is equal to percent times the whole, so we put a W. So just a little simpler equation to help remind you how to set it up. All right, so in our examples, I'm gonna show you guys how we're gonna use this equation to solve some problems. Okay, so here's what I'd like you guys to do. If you haven't done already, go ahead and grab your book. All right, and flip over to page 132. 132. Eyes up here when you're ready to go. Okay, so on page 132, on the guided practice part, here's what it says. The directions say, write an equation for each problem, then solve. Round to the nearest tenth if necessary. All right, so it says, what number is 88% of 300? Now, I do want to give you guys a little reminder. Okay, so just a little reminder from yesterday. You don't have to write this down if you don't want. All right. Remember, it was the percent proportion was part over whole is equal to a percent over 100. And then I gave you some key words, right? And those key words in another version of that was is over of equals percent over 100. So remember that the part, its keywords on a phrase like this is the word is, and the whole, its keyword is of. It will show you where the whole is. All right. Those are just some easier keywords when there's a simple problem like this with just a written out phrase, all right, or question there. So let me reread it again. What number is 88% of 300? So here we go. Go up to the top of the page. This is what I do want you to write. Go to the top of the page. Okay, put a little star. This is just a reference. Okay, this is just a reference, and here it is. P equals percent times the whole. Just put that up at the top. That is to remind you, like we did with percent proportion, that's to remind you how to set up your equation to solve it. Okay? So, here we go. Step 2 is plug in the numbers in the correct spot. So what we have is we have part equals percent times the whole. So I'll go ahead and put the equal sign. All right. First off, right, the percent we've talked about is always the easiest one to find if it's there because it has a big percent sign next to it, right? So what's our percent, guys? 88. It's 88. Now here's what I also want you to do. Put a little star by step 2 and put the word decimal. And here's why. Remember I said there's good things about using the percent equation. That's probably a little better than a proportion. And then there's some downsides. Well, this is one of the downsides. You have to be very careful. When you use a percent equation, okay, remember, is over of equals percent over 100, right? This was the fraction version of a percent. So if we had like 88%, we would have just put 88 over 100, which is a conversion to a fraction form, okay? However, with an equation, we always, before plugging it in, we always need to convert the percent to a decimal. So for example, right, we've talked about this many a times, 88% converted to a decimal is finding the decimal and moving it 2 times to the left, because ultimately we're dividing by 100. So what this is, when I plug the decimal in, instead of plugging the percent in, instead of plugging in 88, I plug in 0.88. Okay? If you don't do that, you will get the wrong answer. So using the equation, when you plug the percent into the equation, you have to put it in decimal form. Now what I've learned is if I use an x multiplication sign like an x, it looks like a variable. If I use the multiplication sign with a dot, it looks like a decimal. So the best way to show this multiplication is just put the whole inside parentheses. As a matter of fact, you probably want to even put the percent inside parentheses. So percent times the whole equals the part. Well, let's see, what else do they give us? They give us the 300, right? What number is 88% of 300? Which word is next to the 300? Of. And what is of? Is it the part of the whole? Of is whole, right? The whole is right here. So the 300 is going right there. Ladies and gentlemen, the part is what we're figuring out. It's the x. Or you can even put it as a p. Just remember that p doesn't stand for percent. All right, now, step 3 is we are going to simplify or solve, depending on what the equation is telling us. And you might go, what does that mean? Well, we'll talk about it in a little while. Okay. In this case, look at, we have this on this right side. We're just going to simplify that by doing the multiplication. So 300 times 0.88 equals 264. Okay, I do want to put a step 4 and put a little star next to this as well, because you don't have to do this one all the time, and that is round it, of course, if necessary. Don't forget about rounding. Okay, that is a whole number, so there's no decimal. We don't have to round to the nearest tenth. And there is, we'll see another step on some problems. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. But first of all, ladies and gentlemen, our answer is this. Now be careful, because on our homework, okay, our homework, if you look at the directions, it says write an equation for each problem. So guess what? You'll also need to make sure that you have your equation written as well. Okay, those will be your two answers, your equation and your answer. So step one is you have your percent equation. Step two is plug the numbers in the right spot, right, based off of the skills that we've talked about already. And then don't forget, if you plug in a percent, make sure it's in decimal form. And then step three is simplify or solve after that. And step four, of course, if you need to, round it. And then you'll have your answer. Okay? Questions on this problem before I have you guys try one? No questions? Okay. All right, here we go. Try out problem number 4 off of your homework. So page 133, problem number 4. Problem number 4. Go. Who needs more time? Okay. Listen, for those of you that are done or almost done, if you want to do another problem that is similar to number 4, you can actually go on to problem number 5. So do number 5 next if you have some extra time. The rest of you, go ahead and finish number 4. Okay, anyone still working on that problem? Okay. All right, so here we go. 30 seconds. Go ahead and listen, when you share, I want you to share your answer. Always start with your answer because I know it makes you guys feel better to start with your answer. Share your answer, but also please compare each other's equations. Make sure your equations match up correctly. All right, 30 seconds. Go.
So far I got 25. You what? Oh yeah,
Okay, here we go. Just looking for an answer. Just the answer. You don't need to give me your equation right now. Just looking for an answer to see what's out there. All right, C23. 23. .3, 24 and 3/10, like that. Agree, disagree? What do you guys have? Okay. All right. Let's. There's one answer. Let's take a look, see if there's others. All right. C16. Not here today. All right. C27. 25.35. 25 and 3500ths. Agree, disagree with that one? Okay, some agreements, some disagreements. All right, let's try one more. Seat 9.
I got 20.25.
20.25. Agree or disagree with that one? Okay, any others out there that would like to share? Denise? 25 and 4/10. I like the way you said it as and 4/10. Okay, agree, disagree with that one? Okay, all right, some agreements. Okay, let's take a look here. All right, so what we have is find 39% of 65. So I'm going to go ahead, set my equation up. All right, I see my percent. My percent is 39%, right? So we're going to go ahead and put it as a decimal, right? 0.39. Okay, I take a look. The other number I have is 65. It's right next to the of. All right, so of we already said, right, was the whole. So that goes right next to the percent. So 65. And our part is what we're trying to figure out. So this is just like the last one. We're going to go ahead and we're going to simplify this side by multiplying. So 65 times 3900ths equal, x is equal to 25 and 3500ths. So as I'm looking at that, I know that I need to make sure I follow my directions, and it is rounding to the nearest tenth. All right, so 5 makes a 3, go up 1, and so rounding is 25 and 4/10. Now I do know that between this one here and this one here, a majority of you guys had those two. If you had this though, what did you forget to do? Forget to round to the nearest tenth. We talked about that a lot, guys. It's right up there, all the place value system, okay? Tenths is 1 over. So if this is round to the nearest tenth, that means your answer should have no more than 1 digit to the right of the decimal, basically. That's what that means, okay? So make sure you use the hundredths to round it. All right? Okay, questions? All right, let's go ahead. Let's look at another kind of problem. Here we go. Back on page 32, number 2 says, I'm going to write this one down for us to see up here. 24 is what percent of 120? So here we go. Part equals percent times the whole. All right, so percent, there is no percent sign. That means that that's what we're figuring out. There is an of, though, and there is an is, right? So there's a whole and a part. So here's what we have. The part is the 24. The whole is the 120. So here's what we have over here. We're trying to find out what the percent is. That's the x. The whole goes after the percent, right? So it's 120. So here we go. Step 1, of course, is we have that up top, right? Step 2 we just did. We might as well write down the steps while we're doing this. Step 2, you plug it into the right spots. Okay? Remember, step 3 is to simplify or solve. In this case, ladies and gentlemen, we can't simplify anything. Simplify usually means, of course, simplify one side of the equation, which means simplify one of the expressions. We have to solve this one. Why? Because we have to get x alone. So 120 times x, it's multiplication, so to get x alone, I'm going to do the opposite, right? The inverse, I'm going to divide by 120. I do it to one side, and like any other one-step equation, I'm going to do it to the other side. So we end up, the 120s cancel out. X equals 24 divided by 120. 24 divided by 120 equals 0.2. Now, before we worry about rounding anything, go ahead and put step star, and this is the main reason why I'm doing this problem. There's actually two reasons, but this is, of course, the main one. If I look here, we're finding out a percent. Now, here's the other little bit of a downside, and it's related to the other downside we talked about of using an equation. Anytime you're dealing with the equation, the percent is always in decimal form, meaning that this here is not our final answer. This is decimal form. We need to put it in percent form to get our final answer. It's not 0.2%. We have to change this over. We move it 2 times which way, guys? To the right, right? Up here we moved it 2 times to the left to get from a percent to a decimal. But now we're changing a decimal back to a percent. So 2 times to the right gives us 20%. And now, of course, we can look to round, but that one doesn't need rounding either. So anytime you're dealing with a percent in an equation, it's always in decimal form. Even when you get an answer, it's going to be in decimal form. So to make it the final answer, to put a percent next to it, you have to move that decimal 2 times to the right. Now, here's the other reason why I like doing this problem is because I had this great question yesterday, and it's exactly the question that pops up every year from my students, and here it goes. Mr. Wilkins, and it was especially after we did this. So one of the first questions was, so you're telling me that when I plug it in, I'm always going to multiply. And again, we've talked about that, right? That student was looking for a very quick way to do it without doing what I'm showing them to do. Okay? When I did this, some people are like, whoa, wait a second, Mr. Wilkins. How do we know when to multiply or when to divide? Okay? Guys, okay, I've been through a lot of math courses. Hopefully you guys do a lot or even go further in math than I do in school. Okay, but I've done a lot of math courses. When I do a problem like this, never once do I ever look at the original problem and go, oh, multiply or divide, which one do I do? I don't look for a quick, simple answer. I let the equation tell me what I do. Follow the equation. Plug your numbers in, and if they are next to each other, right, that means multiplication. If they are across from each other and you have a variable next to a number, that means that to get rid of it, you have to divide both sides. The equation, use it as a tool. It will tell you to multiply or divide, okay, as long as you plug in your numbers in the correct spot. So be very careful when you do that, when you do step 2. Okay? Those are great questions the students asked yesterday. It didn't surprise me because that's asked every single year. Okay, and so it gives me an opportunity to tell you what I just told you. Okay? All right. Besides those kind of questions that maybe some of you were thinking, any other questions out there before I let you guys try one like this?
If it was a whole number, would you still move it twice?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So if you solve it and you get like, and this is just a what if sort of thing. Let's say you solved it. I solved this problem and I got 4 equals x. But you knew that it is the decimal form. You still move the decimal over 2 times, and that ends up being a 400%. Okay? So anytime you're finding the percent, when you get that answer you're finding the percent, you get that answer, you always move the decimal. Find that decimal, move it over 2 times to the right to get your answer for a percent. Okay? Because it's always going to be in decimal form. Okay? Guys, any other questions? All right, here's one I want you guys to try out. Try out on your homework problem number 2. Problem number 2. All right, go. How many of you need more time? Okay. All right. Guys, those of you that are done with it, you can work on 1 through 6. All right. The two things I showed you, you'll be able to solve any of those problems. Make sure you have your equation and your answer. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, okay, tomorrow logs are due, last day for logs. So make sure if you haven't gotten your signature yet, get it tonight. Okay, don't forget. Okay, who still needs more time? Okay, about 15 more seconds and then I'll have you guys share. Okay. All right, 30 seconds. Again, share your answer and also share your equation. All right, 30 seconds. Go. All right, here we go. Problem number 2. Okay, so I have my equation. 84 is 60% of what number? Wait, was that the problem we were doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 84 is 60% of what number? So I'm going to go ahead and I do see my percent here, right? So I plug in my percent in decimal form. It ends up being 0.6. Okay, 84 is right next to the is, meaning that's our part. So actually 84 goes on that left side because that's where our part is. Of course, the of, meaning the whole, is what we need to figure out. That's our x. So in this case, I take a look. 6/10 times x, that means I have to solve for x. So since they're multiplied, I'm going to do the opposite. The inverse, I'm going to divide by 6/10. Whatever I do to one side of the equal sign, I do to the other. That cancels out. I end up with x equals. And so I have 84 divided by 6/10 equals 140. Do I move the decimal twice? No, why not? It's not asking for a percent. Good. All right, it's not asking for a percent. So meaning that is my final answer. If you're careful when you plug in the numbers, the equation will tell you if you need to multiply or divide what your next step is. Okay, questions on that problem?
Instead of putting 0.6, I put 0.60.
0.60 is the same. Yeah, it'll give you the same answer. Okay, guys, other questions? Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at one more type of problem. Let's look at page 132, problem number 4. Okay, number 4 is a word problem. Let's go ahead and close read that. Here we go. So 132, problem number 4. A local bakery sold 60 loaves of bread in one day. If 65% of these were sold in the
Afternoon.
how many loaves were
Sold.
in the afternoon? Okay, so here we go. Remember, we've talked about this before. This is a little bit of a challenge with word problems, but the only challenging part of it is being able to read it and understand, of course, what is the part and what is the whole, right? So, here we go. Do we have a percentage there?
Yes.
Yeah, what is it? 65. So don't forget, right? Plug it in as 0.65. Move that decimal over twice. Now, the only other number that we have is 60. So now listen, you have to know, what does the 60 represent in this story? Okay, now I know the units are loaves, yes, okay, but what about it? You have to decide. Well, if I read it, it says the local bakery sold 60 loaves of bread in 1 day. Then I read the question itself at the very end. How many loaves were sold in the afternoon? So we're dealing with two different time frames, a day and an afternoon. So when we're thinking of a part and a whole, you should be thinking, well, is a day part of an afternoon, or is an afternoon part of a day? Well, which one's the part, guys? We don't know. Well, think about it. What's bigger, a day or an afternoon?
A day.
A day, that's the whole. An afternoon is part of that whole day, right? You have a morning, you have an afternoon, and you have an evening, let's say. All right, so a day is the whole. The afternoon is the part. So it says the 60 loaves of bread were baked in what? 1 day. That's our whole. That's the amount from the whole day. So that number 60 goes in the whole. The part is what we're figuring out, meaning how many were baked in the afternoon. That's the part in this story, right? So at this point, all we do is we go 0.65 times 60 equals, because we're simplifying this side, so x is equal to, my calculator says 39. And guys, like any other word problem, right, what do we need at the end?
Loaves.
The units. So 39 what? Loaves. If you want to put loaves of bread, that's okay too. Okay, questions on that problem? Okay. All right, guys. So those are the three different types of problems on tonight's homework on percent equations.